This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The police chief of Al-Fallujah, Mahmoud al-Asawi, told our Al Arabiya reporter that the Iraqi security forces arrested 6 al-Qaeda suspects. He added that the detainees confessed that they were planning a number of explosions and that they have been training suicide bombers to carry them out.
Iraqi security forces arrested 6 al-Qaeda suspects in Fallujah, west of Baghdad. This operation was the result of a continuous investigation by the police, which established a special team to investigate the targeting of police units with armed attacks, the latest of which was carried out by a booby-trapped vehicle that exploded in Al-Gharma area northeast of Al-Fallujah. The Iraqi police found the perpetrators based on information provided by a resident in the area who witnessed the explosion. After the area of Jisr al-Raud was blockaded, the suspects were arrested. The police found in their possession explosive substances and equipment used to make bombs and plant them in booby-trapped vehicles. In addition, the police found different weapons that were considered as sufficient evidence to charge the suspects.
They directly confessed without any torture or beatings.
The 6 defendants confessed in front of the chief investigator. It became clear after their identities were revealed that 2 of them were already wanted by the Iraqi security. 4 of them were detained by the American forces and were released last July.
Thank God we were able to arrest them. They confessed to crimes including planting bombs in a vehicle which was detonated near a police unit in Al Jazeera Market. They also confessed to killing the passengers in the vehicle who were from southern areas.
One of the defendants confessed to committing killings, thefts, and kidnappings on an international road in western Iraq, which links between Syria, Jordan, and Baghdad between 2006 and 2007. Others confessed to hijacking 5 cargo trucks loaded with food supplies, coming from southern Iraq, and to killing the drivers. They also confessed to raiding a mosque, known as Aisha Mosque, and killing the worshippers and those that were in charge.
The 6 defendants confessed to planting bombs in the Gharma area and preparing booby-trapped vehicles and transporting them to Fallujah and Ramadi areas. They also confessed to taking part in attacking the police, army, and American forces.
Sporadic acts of violence took place in Fallujah, killing dozens of civilians and members of the security forces, something that clearly can be considered as security breaches, raising concerns among citizens that the armed operations may return, and that al-Qaeda fighters may take control of the area once again.
At
least 7 people, including a soldier, were killed in Pakistan, and 9 others were wounded when a person blew himself up near a checkpoint close to a Pakistani Air Force base in Kamra. The base is about 50 kilometers away from the capital, Islamabad. This new attack took place amidst the ongoing military operations launched by the Pakistani army against the Pakistani Taliban in southern Waziristan, which led to the displacement of thousands.
On the 6th day of the military operations that the Pakistani army launched on the Pakistani Taliban strongholds, tens of thousands of displaced civilians are the primary outcome of this continuous war that subsides at times and rages at others. These people escaped from the conflict zones and walked dozens of kilometers in search of security and something to drink. The Pakistani government opened relief centers to distribute aid and register the refugees. The Pakistani authorities expect the number of refugees to reach reach more than 200,000 in the next several months. This means that the military operations will continue until further notice. The UN Nations High Commissioner for Refugees warns that the delivery of aid to those most affected by the military operations is the biggest challenge that the international relief organizations are facing, especially in the areas that the displaced have taken refuge in.
If the government wants to continue these military operations, so be it. These issues are beyond our control. But if some people made mistakes, the government should not confuse them with us. The government should pay attention to the fact that some people are neutral in this conflict.
The Pakistani army released these pictures after air and ground attacks that it launched on southern Waziristan. The army managed to take over a large amount of ammunition and drove the Pakistani Taliban fighters away from a number of villages which were under their control. But the refugees from the conflict areas say that the Taliban fighters are still moving freely, and they are centered in most of the areas in southern Waziristan. This means that the fighting may not end anytime soon like the Pakistani army hopes. The Western countries, headed by the United States, followed the Pakistani military campaign closely. They hope that the Pakistani army expands the attacks on the Pakistani Taliban to include other armed groups in northern Waziristan as well. Abdul Qadir Belhaj, BBC.
The joint Israeli and American military maneuvers carried messages to Iran. The military commanders reiterated that these maneuvers are only defensive drills and that they are aimed at establishing the most advanced anti-missile systems in the world. However, Israeli media reported several other objectives, including flexing Israeli muscles in front of Iran. The Israeli media also said that these drills do not necessarily mean that Israeli-American relations are as warm as they used to be. Our reporter Sharouk Assad reports from Jerusalem.
These major joint military operations between Israel and the U.S., led by the commander of the U.S. Sixth Fleet, are dubbed Juniper Cobra. The maneuvers are aimed at dealing with the possibility that Israel may be subjected to missiles from Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza all at once.
The Juniper Cobra exercise will strengthen our ability to deal with multiple ballistic missile attacks. This exercise does not include offensive drills, only defensive ones, and they are not in response to recent international developments.
Thousands of Israeli soldiers, accompanied by 1,000 American soldiers, came from American military bases in Europe. The military maneuvers included testing Israeli and American anti-missile systems, as well as the American anti-ballistic missile system known as the SMART system. The U.S. established this system in Israel 1 year ago.
This exercise is the product of 2 years of work. In 3 weeks, we will test our scientific and technical capabilities and make sure that our joint defense systems are suitable to confront several possible scenarios.
Thus, these drills are aimed at strengthening the Israeli and American alliance, which is already strong. They did not talk about the details, but the messages are clear. One is a warning message to Iran, and the other one is aimed at reassuring the world and the Israelis.
The first message is aimed to assure the Israeli public that the U.S. is still committed to protecting Israel's existence and security. The second message is aimed at sending a warning to neighboring countries, especially Iran.
Israel usually follows huge military maneuvers with attacks. This means that the possibility of war with Iran is still on the table. Most Israeli leaders wish for war, and until this is achieved, they do not see why Israel and the U.S. should not reaffirm their alliance and show their army's strength and deterrence capabilities. Therefore, the U.S. and Israel are using these drills to flex their muscles and send clear messages to many parties in the region, and to reaffirm the strong ties between the two friends, Washington and Tel Aviv.
الذي أكدت فيه أن شعبية حركة حماس
Now we will talk about the survey that was published in the British Times newspaper. According to the survey, Hamas is gaining more popularity, which is a source of concern to the Zionist occupation and the West, because they fear that Mahmoud Abbas may be defeated in the upcoming elections. The British newspaper said that Abbas's popularity decreased after he decided to postpone the voting on the Goldstone report at the UN Human Rights Council.
Every Palestinian is posing a big question. What if Hamas refuses to hold the elections on the date that Fatah wants? What will happen? Will there be a new siege on Gaza, or will the existing one be strengthened? Hamas wants guarantees that the international community will accept the results of the elections regardless of who wins. The Palestinians' right to vote for the government they want is their legitimate right, and the international community must respect that. It is not fair to punish people because they voted for one party or the other. Some said that Hamas is making presumptions, but that claim itself reflects ignorance of what is going on among the Palestinians. Palestinians continue to be subjected to an indiscriminate siege, and hundreds of them have died as a result of the war on Gaza. The British Times newspaper reported that there is a notable increase in Hamas's popularity among Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. According to the report, the Palestinian Authority and its president Mahmoud Abbas will inevitably be defeated if the elections were to be held today. The British newspaper said that Abbas's popularity decreased due to the Goldstone report scandal. Although Abbas security forces, in collaboration with the occupation authorities, constantly pursue Hamas's members and use oppressive policies against them, Hamas's popularity still increased. Palestinian voters know very well that their rights cannot be gained without paying a price, and this is why they vote for Hamas.
Joining us is Dr. Sami Abu Zuhri, the official spokesman of Hamas. What is the significance of the fact that this report was published by a British newspaper?
Let me say that the report talked about the position of the Palestinian Authority towards the Goldstone report, which means that the PA has committed a shameful act, and it will not be able to wash its hands from it with some media campaigns and fabrications, even if they attack Hamas. This will not work. International leaders such as UN official Richard Ford criticized the Palestinian Authority's role, not Hamas. The implications of this survey that was published by the British Times are very important. At this time, the Palestinian Authority says that Hamas does not want reconciliation with Fatah because it wants to derail the Palestinian elections. However, this survey shows that Hamas has the support of the majority of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. This means that Hamas is not afraid of the elections. Keep in mind that this survey was held by a Western newspaper, not by Hamas.
Of course, the British Times newspaper is widespread. Does the fact that this survey was published by a Western newspaper affect the official Western position towards Hamas?
Supposedly, Western officials should respect such a report. Keep in mind that European public opinion increasingly rejects the continued political isolation of the Hamas movement. We know that the report of this British newspaper can't be ignored because it is a well-known international newspaper and it is a prominent one. In addition, the timing of the publishing of the survey results has serious implications because its important questions about the future of power structure in the Palestinian areas are being raised at this time. Fatah claims that Hamas does not want elections, claiming that our popularity has decreased, but Hamas's popularity has actually increased. This was expressed by a British newspaper, not an Arab, Palestinian, or Hamas-affiliated newspaper.
According to a UN report, Iraq has the highest number of widows, orphans, and bereaved women. Our correspondent, Karam Muntafar in Baghdad, has the details in this special report.
بعد دخول الاحتلال الأمريكي للعراق عام 2003.
After the 2003 U.S.-led occupation of Iraq started, a dim and painful picture of Iraq has emerged. Since then, Iraq has been battered by explosions, random killings, and destruction. In addition, many Iraqi cities witness street confrontations often provoked by the occupation's war machinery under the pretext of fighting the insurgency. Muhammad is a grieving, middle-aged mother. The story she is about to tell us is not fictional. This is the story of a mother who lost her only 2 sons. Muhammad has fallen victim to the silent tragedy of life, a life that is filled with tears, sadness, and emptiness.
Oh, my children, where are you?
طلع من عندنا الساعة ب7 راح البيت متجر بالشعب.
He left our home at 7 o'clock and went to his rented apartment in the area of Sha'ab. At 9 o'clock, we received a phone call saying that Jasim had been wounded and taken to a police station. Why would they take him to a police station? Then we heard about the incidents in the city. Our home came under heavy fire, so we fled. At 2 o'clock, the area was surrounded. We didn't have access to food, water, or medicine. Most of the residents have fled their homes due to the shelling. They fired missiles at the local school. I can't say for sure, but I think the Americans were the ones who fired the missiles. It must have been the Americans. Who else would fire missiles at a children's school?
قتل ودمار واستهداف للأبرياء وانتهاك الحرمات هي لغة الاحتلال.
This is the language of the occupation, the language of killing, destruction, and the targeting of civilians. Abu Shahab has a similar story to the one we just heard. He is a helpless man who has been battling disease for many years. Shahab was his only son who helped and provided for him. When we asked him about his son, Abu Shahab broke out into tears and told us his ordeal.
غمرته الدموع وأخبرنا القصة.
I'm Abu Shihab. Shihab dropped out of school so he can work and provide for us. He was the only provider. He was killed in the incidents that took place in the city of Sadr. His friend's home was hit and collapsed over the family. After hearing about the incident, Shihab rushed to his friend's home in order to help rescue the victims who were trapped under the rubble. He, along with nearly 16 or 17 people, I can't recall the exact number, tried to pull out the victims from under the rubble. 9 people were trapped inside the 2-story home. The home was hit by a missile. Upon hearing about the incident, Shihab rushed to his friend's home. I asked him, "Do you have to go?" He said, "Yes, my friend's home collapsed over them." He went there. The home was hit by a second missile, and he was martyred.
According to a UN report, Iraq has the highest number of widows, orphans, needy, and bereaved women. This is due in part to the ongoing violations and practices of the U.S. occupation forces in Iraq. Meanwhile, Iraq's victims are hoping that their government will help end their suffering. Will the Iraqi government deliver on its promises, or will they remain empty promises? For the new satellite television channel, Karam Mutafar, Baghdad.
The city of Ishbilia witnessed another demonstration of people rejecting the construction of mosques in some cities. Protests were organized against expanding the projects of mosque construction in one of the neighborhoods of this Andalusian city. Our correspondent, Amina Zubair, has the full story from Madrid.
As if the ghosts of the Inquisition courts were resurrected, some of today's Spaniards insist that they would not let a single brick be built of the mosque that was supposed to be constructed in Ishbila, capital of the Andalusia region.
We should do what our ancestors did and expel them with spears.
Some of them cited cultural differences to explain their objection to building the mosque.
I say no to the construction of the mosque because their culture is different from ours. In their countries, they forbid us from building churches and carrying crosses.
Some others said that they fear for their children's future if a mosque is built in the neighborhood.
I have children and I want to guarantee their future. I want workshops built for study and public facilities for the neighborhood. I don't want them to specify projects for Muslims. They should go somewhere else or back to their countries.
With all this happening, it seemed difficult to those who ironically gathered at the Crescent Square in Ishbila city to express an opposing opinion.
They have a right to worship like the rest of the people.
In Madrid, it seems that things are not as complicated, but gaining the license to build some mosques and covering their expenses remains the most difficult mission that some Muslim communities are facing. Ahmed Hassim, president of SOFA Institution, knows these obstacles well. The institution manages a small mosque in southern Madrid. Like numerous other mosques, it suffers from lack of funds and problems providing necessary facilities for worship.
All the funds for paying the expenses of the mosque come from individual donators who visit the mosque and give charity. Therefore, the problem of sustaining the mosque has been there for a long time.
Some believe that the financial crisis that stormed the immigrant community has made the problem worse due to a decline of Muslim donations and lack of aid from the Spanish government. Ayman Al-Zubir, Al Jazeera, Madrid.
Afghanistan's recent election was hailed as an example of democracy, but more than 1 million ballots were discounted due to fraud. Why isn't Karzai being held responsible for this blatant act of election fraud? And is Afghanistan the good war? Answers to these questions and more on Link TV's Mosaic Intelligence Report.
If someone is caught cheating in the Olympics or another sporting event, the athlete is immediately disqualified and it is seen as a disgrace. In the case of the recent election in Afghanistan, however, cheating has been rewarded and even praised by no less than the President of the United States himself. President Obama said that he contacted Hamid Karzai shortly after the Afghan president said he would abide by the results of a presidential election held in August. I wanted to congratulate him on accepting the certification of the recent election, Mr. Obama said. How quickly have we forgotten how many Western leaders hailed the August 20th vote as an example of democracy, a democracy marred with fraud. And we're not talking here about a few hundred hanging chads, but rather more than 1 million ballots cast on August 20th that were discounted due to the coefficient of fraud, as the Electoral Complaints Commission refers to it. Mr. Hamid Karzai now says he wants a better and cleaner presidential election runoff in November to bring stability to Afghanistan at a time when Taliban violence is at its worst in 8 years of war.
There is no doubt that many irregularities happened during polling, as happened the day before the elections, as you know.
The Afghan leader has played down fraud allegations, but bowed to international pressure by ordering a runoff as a way to bolster the election's credibility at a time when Washington is weighing whether to send more troops to Afghanistan. Now that we're holding the second round in 2 weeks, I want it to be better than the first round, Karzai said. Why isn't Mr. Karzai being held responsible for this blatant act of election fraud? And who can guarantee that a repeat of the fraud won't happen? Or that all hell won't break loose during the runoff? Since the August 20th vote, 5 suicide bombs alone have ripped through the capital, Kabul.
Afghanistan has been on a different and worrisome trajectory.
As President Obama ponders sending more troops to Afghanistan and anxiety and anticipation are building up over the runoff, a recently released United Nations report says that Afghanistan produces 92% of the world's opium. The equivalent of 3,500 tons leave the country each year, fetching more than $65 billion to fund global terrorism. The Taliban's direct involvement in the opium trade allows them to fund a war machine that is becoming technologically more complex. The report also says that every year, opium kills 5 times more people in NATO countries than all the NATO lives lost in 8 years of fighting against the Taliban. So here is something to think about. According to the CIA's World Factbook, Afghanistan's entire GDP in 2008 was $22.27 billion. President Obama's decision to send 21,000 additional troops to Afghanistan to bolster security earlier this year has failed, and the country is just as unstable as ever. Would 40,000 additional troops help? Perhaps for a short while. But with the Taliban and Afghan warlords earning this kind of money from the opium trade, not only by politicians, but can also keep this war going for 100 years. Afghanistan is not the good war. I'm Jamal Dajani for the Mosaic Intelligence Report. To learn more about this program or to share your thoughts, visit us at linktv.org/mir. You can also follow my updates on Twitter.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.